present Mr. Pete Smith.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to step off this real quick. Former President John Quincy Adams said this: if your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, to become more, then you are a leader. Good evening, everyone. My name is Pete Smith, and I want to welcome you to the presentation called A Stroke of Significance. You know, if you listen to the words of Adams, or if you read what he wrote, you realize that he makes no reference to someone's profession. He makes no reference to someone's position in the company, and he certainly makes no reference to someone's title. Rather, what Adams is talking about is how one person has the ability to make an impact on another, how one person has the ability to influence the actions of another, how one person has the ability to inspire another. Essentially, what he's talking about is the role of one person to create a change in someone else. He just happens to describe it the way where people dream more, learn more, do more, and become more. Now, I start with that quote because I think it's important for everyone in this room to understand that it doesn't matter to me where you work, what you do, and certainly you don't care about your title. What's important to me is that you recognize that you have the ability, you have the opportunity to be a leader in the life of someone else. Now, whether or not you accept that opportunity, whether or not you take that on, is up to you. But you all have that ability. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about a decision that you need to make. It's actually a decision that you have to make, but I'm not quite sure you're aware of. As a matter of fact, not only are you probably not aware of the decision, you don't even know that you've been asking this question. And yet, it's a question that you do ask yourself, and it's a decision that you are going to make. It's going to determine the scope of your impact, both in your personal and your professional lives. It's a question that's actually going to drive right to the core of who you are. Now, some of you, as I sit here, are sitting there, you're looking at me saying, Pete, who the heck are you? Right? Who are you to ask us a question? Who are you to tell us that this particular question is going to help determine the scope of my impact? And I think that's a valid question, so let me answer that for you. And I'll give it to you in two different areas. I'll talk to you a little bit about personally, and I'll talk to you about professionally. Let me start off personally. I live in Arlington, Virginia with my wife, with our son, and with our dog. Do I have any dog owners in the house? Nice, a few dog owners. Okay, good. How many of you are familiar with Irish setters? You're familiar with them, right? So when I ask people if they're familiar with Irish setters, I say, tell me what you know about Irish setters. They typically say it politically correctly. They typically say, well, they have a lot of energy. Right? That's true. Really, what people really mean is that they're crazy. And my dog is no different. We love her, but she's crazy. Do you know why she's crazy? Because she's a redhead. That's a little true. She's a little bit nutty. We love her, but it's true. So let me give you an idea of what my house looks like. And my wife is a redhead. Now that's an interesting phenomenon in and of itself, because you may have noticed that redheads don't typically marry each other. See, we're always usually cordial to each other because we've all read the same reports about how we're going to be extinct. So we always acknowledge each other, but very rarely do redheads actually marry each other. And I was lucky enough to find one that actually wanted to marry a redhead. And because my wife is a redhead, and I'm of course a redhead, there's a very good chance that her kids are going to be redheads. And sure enough, our son came out and he has red hair. So my wife has red hair, I have red hair, our son has red hair, and our dog has red hair. So you see the theme that takes place in my house, right? But we found a great way to make the dynamics work. There's no arguing. When any of us shed, there's no finger pointing. We all just accept that it's ours. We kind of sweep it up and we move on. It works out perfectly. I'm also a former wrestler and a former coach. I had the opportunity to wrestle at the Division I level back in the early and mid-90s. It's an opportunity that I will treasure forever. It's also the reason why I'm here, because I happen to love the sport. And I have the utmost respect and admiration for anyone who is willing to put on shoes, strap up the laces, go out, shake hands, and put it all on the line. Professional and business owner. I do a lot of work with business owners, I do a lot of work with business leaders and managers, and we talk about what it means to be a leader and how to enhance those skills. And we also talk about things that are getting in your way and how to overcome them. And it's a fascinating discussion. I want to talk to you about something tonight that is near and dear to the hearts of many of you. For right now, I'm going to refer to it as it. And it is it. As a matter of fact, that's the higher you go up in business, the higher you go up within an organization, you think that you achieve a certain level of success because you have it. And the more that you move up in an organization, the more you try to maintain it. And for those people who don't feel like they have it, they'll complain that they don't have it. And then they'll talk about how great things would be if they had it. And then we'll realize that no one has it. We're all going to is it? What is this force, this concept that I'm talking about? Well, what I'm referring to here is this whole idea of being in control. How many of you like the idea that you control certain aspects of your life? At least you think you do. How many of you live or work with someone who enjoys it a little bit too much? You all work with those people. Yesterday, I was with a group of high-level executives out in Fairfax, Virginia, and I asked them the very same question I just asked you. And I said, tell me about the things you actually control. It's the same question I have for you. Think about the things you actually control. So here I was with a group of high executives, and they started throwing out answers left and right about all the things that they believe they control. And the answers ranged from attitudes, emotions, and everything else. Finally, one executive said, there's really not too much I don't control. I said, give me an example of one thing. He says, well, I control the car that I drive. I control the type of job that I'm in. And I said, well, why don't we look at control this way? It's the same way that I want you to look at control. See, most people's interpretations of what it means to be in control, it means that they're able to dictate the outcomes of an event. They're able to dictate certain courses of action which are going to then dictate the outcomes. That's their idea of being in control. So if we look at control in that way, I can ask you, what do you really control? See, yesterday when I asked that group, we went through every single answer. For the person who said that they control the type of car that they're driving, I said, what type of car do you drive? He said, I drive an Audi. I said, great. Did you start a company? He said, did I start an Audi? I said, did you start that? He said, no. I said, well, if you didn't start, maybe you were just part of a manufacturing plant that helped develop that car that you're going to drive. Is that right? And he said, no. So he says, you mean to tell me that you were relying on other people to do their job in order for you to drive the car that you drive currently? Do you really control that? He said, well, no, I don't control it. Maybe it was a choice that I make. And I said, that's one of the biggest distinctions that we need to make, is the distinction between control and choice. Because the reality is, we don't really control much. Most people like to believe that they control certain aspects of their lives, but the reality is we control very little, if anything. But we always have choice. You know, this is something that I had no conception, that I had known in theory, but it became very real to me one day. It became very real to me on Thursday, May 6, 2010, at 6:45 in the morning. At the time I was getting ready for work, I was a director of operations, and I was checking my laptop, my email, and I closed the laptop to get ready for work, and all of a sudden I felt my legs get a little bit wobbly. And I thought, boy, that's interesting. I'm not really sure what that is. And, you know, I had played ball games the night before, and I thought maybe I was just tired, maybe I was cramping on something along those lines. So I stayed there for a second. And I realized my legs were getting wobbly again. And I thought something's wrong. And then the third time my legs got wobbly, I realized not only are they wobbly, they're actually starting to bobble. So at the time, I called upstairs to my wife, Whitney, as I went crashing to the ground. Luckily for me, there was a chair behind me which broke my fall, so I ended up sitting upright. Now, I can't tell you the time, in between the time I landed and the time my wife came to the top of the stairs. I don't know if it was seconds, I don't know if it was minutes, I honestly don't know the time. And yet, that particular time is significant because it happened to be the most terrifying time of my entire life. See, during that time, as I was sitting there, what I actually heard was my body shutting down. Now, if you've never had that experience, I'll try to relay it in a way that you can possibly experience. Have you ever heard an engine wind down? If you know that sound, then you can understand exactly the sound that I heard. See, my body was shutting down. And the worst part about that whole experience is that there was absolutely nothing I could do to jumpstart it. I remember thinking, this can't happen. There's no way that this is happening. And yet it was. The image that came to mind was that the hamster wheel, how could we get that going? And there was nothing that I could do. I thought at the time, this is how it's going to end. I thought, you're kidding me. I was 35 years old. And I thought, this is it. This is it. This can't be. My thoughts reflected back to an aunt that I had who died in the 80s of brain aneurysm, and I thought, wow, is this what she experienced? I remember thinking, what's the impact this is going to have on my wife? She eventually will come downstairs. She is going to turn the corner. She's going to see me dead on the dining room floor. What impact is this going to have on her? What impact is this going to have on my family when they realize that my life is done? So these are all the thoughts that I had going through in that split second of time. Now, sure enough, my wife did come to the top of the stairs, and she did call my name. And as I tried to call out to her, I realized I couldn't speak. I couldn't call back out to her, I lost my speech. She came downstairs, and she looked at me. The fact that I couldn't tell her to call 911 was a pretty good indicator that she needed to, which of course she did. And I remember looking at her thinking, what's the impact this is going to have? See, we had gotten engaged. Calling her my wife, she's my wife now, she was my fiance at the time. We had gotten engaged 2 months prior. Now, I will tell you the same thing I told her. Those two things are not related. Just because we got engaged, not meaning that I stroke 2 months later. So as my wife was sitting there, she was on the phone. It was the first time I heard the word stroke. And I remember thinking, who has a stroke at age 35? Apparently I do. They must have asked her whether or not I had lost any kind of sensation in my body. And it was right at that time that I ended up looking down on my lap, where my right arm was situated right there. Now, you don't need to take anatomy and physiology to recognize which limbs are yours. I was well aware that this was mine. I had known for 35 years, and yet there was absolutely zero connection between my arm and my brain. It was as if it was someone else's arm sitting in my lap. See, I lost the whole right side of my body as well. Now, the good news is that this story has not been clear. Obviously, I did die. Obviously, my speech came back to me, as did the right side of my body. But I can tell you through that experience, as terrifying as it was also extremely satisfying to a certain degree. The thoughts on my mind constantly went back to what impact is this going to have on people? What impact did I have while I was here? So again, I'm asking, what do you really control? See, there were 2 things that I learned from that experience. Number one is that life goes on. I took a few days off of work after the show, but when I returned, I found that people were still going to work. We still had clients to serve. Life continued. But the second lesson I learned from that, probably the most important one, and that is this. We're not really in control. We like to believe that we are, but we're not. The reason why I say that is because as I look at the reasons why I have, it's not the fact that you're here, although I give every athlete and every parent credit for being here, and there are other places that you can be. It's not the fact that some of you are going to lose, and some of you are going to win, and some of you are going to win a little bit more than others. In my opinion, the best part about you being here, and the best part about you engaging with the sport, which then takes you everywhere, is the idea that for a brief moment of time, for those 6 minutes and all the time leading up to those 6 minutes, you are able to address one of the most toxic forces known to man. You are able to address one of the most fierce competitors you will ever come across. This toxic force, this competitor, is your fear, is your doubt, and is your insecurities. And for the moment in time, you're able to acknowledge that you have, and yet you choose to engage anyway. Now, fear, doubts, and insecurities aren't things that we typically talk about, yet we all have. You may think that that's a decision like that is insignificant, it's inconsequential, and I disagree. And the reason why I say this is I wish you were able to take that mentality with you and apply it to other aspects of your life. But unfortunately, many of you will not. Here's the reason why I say that. Let me give you an idea of other cases where a similar decision would be made. A couple months ago, I had a friend come up and visit, and we were talking about his work. He's a business owner. He owns his own business down in Harrisburg, Virginia. And he said, you know, this is the 10th business that I own. I said, what are you talking about? This is the only business you've ever known. I've known you for 20 years. What are you talking about? He said, well, the previous 9 started in my head. And in every case, I was able to talk myself out of starting it because I just knew it wasn't going to be successful. Do you hear how the fear, doubt, and insecurity prevented him from starting his previous 9 businesses? I'm wondering how many conversations will you not engage in? Even though it's in the best interest of other people, but you won't do it because you fear the consequences of that conversation. You fear whether or not you're going to be liked by that person after the conversation. I wonder how many marriages would we save if we weren't so focused on being right and instead focused on our commitment and seeking resolution. See, it's the same decision, it just manifests itself in different ways. You have the opportunity to face those fears today and the rest of the arena, and yet you're going to face the same things beyond. So the question I have for you is, if we're not in control, then there's one of 2 ways that we can look at things. We can look at things and say, well, if we're not in control, then why bother? And why bother? Or we can look at things and we can say, because we're not in control, why not? And it's that question that you ask yourself consistently that is going to determine the scope of your impact. Will you choose why bother? Will you choose why not? Now, when I share this story, most people immediately like to gravitate towards the why not. Everyone wants to believe that I'm a why not person. I'm living life to its fullest. I'm courageous and everything else, but that's not entirely true for most people. And maybe it would help you if I could identify for you what do I mean by the different rules? What do I mean when I talk about why bother? Well, I'm wondering how many of your decisions are influenced by your fears, by your doubts, by your insecurities. How much time do you spend rationalizing the way that your life is, even though it's not really the way that you want it to be? How much time do you spend making excuses as to why something didn't get done, instead of just focusing your efforts on getting it done? I wonder how much time do you spend blaming other people or other circumstances for the way things are in your life? I'm wondering how often do you suffer from the scarcity mindset, specifically the scarcity of time and money? I think we all know people who say things like, if I just had more time, I would do this. If I just had more money, I would do this, and get every money. That's a why not perspective. So what do I mean by why not? The people with a why not perspective look at things and say, I understand that this is predictable, I'm going to pursue what's possible. They're going to realize that they're going to pursue something that might even make them feel vulnerable, which is not something that we typically talk about, yet they do it anyway. They're going to pursue things and take risks. Be courageous, and they're going to look at these not from the scarcity mindset, but from an abundance mindset. So which will you choose? You know, when you look at the comparison between why bother and why not, you can say, well, why would anyone choose why bother? Right? All people who are having fun are in the why not category. And yet we don't. We're often not even choosing why bother. And when we do that, because from an early point in our lives, we start creating that inner voice, that internal critic, who tells us that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not tall enough, all the minimizing statements that we tell ourselves, which we all have, we just don't admit it. And so we're left with a wild perspective. So how do we get out of that? Well, there's a few things that we need to do to minimize that. The first thing we need to stop doing is we need to stop denying. Why do we deny that we have serious doubts and insecurities when everyone has? We need to stop denying. The second thing we need to do is we need to stop suppressing, because once we start suppressing, it means that we're wrong for having it. Not wrong. We have it. So what's the alternative? The alternative is, why don't we start acknowledging it? Why don't we start sharing those things with other people, because when we acknowledge it, we actually minimize the power over us. How about the conversation you're engaged in? What do you listen for with each other and with kids? How about conversations that are filled with minimizing statements? How about conversations that are filled with excuses in the way that we rationalize? How about those conversations? How about change them? How about we start encouraging each other to take risks? And it's okay to fail, as long as we're able to bounce out and be successful. How about those conversations? You know, I think we do some of our students and our athletes a disservice because we're so focused on asking them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Instead, I'd rather start asking them, who do you want to be when you grow up? We're so worried about focusing on a particular job that they have, I think instead we need to focus on the characteristics and qualities that we bring to any job that we have. We need to stop worrying about getting a job in a profession that pays well, and instead start tapping into passion and purpose, and then money will follow. If we're able to have those conversations, if we're able to talk with our kids and each other about our fears, our doubts, and insecurities, so we make a decision to overcome them, then you'll be able to see the sort of your impact grow much wider than you think it's possible. So I ask you, what do you choose? So you don't need a life or death moment to make a transformational decision. So which will you choose? Will you choose why not? Or will you choose why not? I give you a lot of credit for being here. I want to wish you luck in the competition today, tomorrow, and Sunday. Good luck to all the athletes.